She gave up the love of her life just to protect her daughter from a cruel world. Welcome back and enjoy the story. In the seaside town of Newport, Rhode Island, where Victorian mansions stood proudly alongside modest family businesses, 42-year-old Fiona Cartwright stared at the empty bed where her husband should have been. The indentation on his pillow had long since disappeared, much like Gregory himself, who had vanished without warning 3 weeks ago. Their joint bank accounts had been drained, leaving only a cryptic note: "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." 20 years of marriage, erased with 7 words scrawled on restaurant stationery. The morning light filtered through lace curtains, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air of their bedroom, a room now haunted by unanswered questions. Fiona's fingers trembled as she tucked a strand of honey-blonde hair behind her ear. Her wedding ring caught the light, a mocking reminder of vows that had apparently meant nothing to Gregory. "Mum?" The voice from the doorway belonged to Talia, their 16-year-old daughter. She stood with her shoulders hunched, dark circles under her eyes, testament to nights spent crying. The bank called again. Fiona straightened her spine, swallowing, the sob that threatened to escape. Talia didn't need to see her fall apart, not when their world was already crumbling. "I'll handle it," she said with a confidence she didn't feel. The enormity of their situation crashed over her like the waves that battered Newport's famous cliff walk during winter storms. The Lighthouse, their family restaurant overlooking the harbor, was 3 months behind on its mortgage payments. Their home, a charming colonial that had been in Gregory's family for generations, would be foreclosed on in 6 months if Fiona couldn't make the payments. 20 years as the perfect wife and mother had left her with no resume, no savings of her own, and no idea how to run a business that had always been Gregory's domain. As she descended the stairs, bills clutched in her hand like dying flowers, Fiona caught sight of her reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at her was a stranger, eyes hollowed by shock, skin pale from sleepless nights. This woman looked nothing like the confident hostess who had charmed customers at the Lighthouse for 2 decades. That evening, after Talia had retreated to her room, Fiona stood in the empty restaurant kitchen, surrounded by gleaming copper pots that hadn't been used in days. The Lighthouse had been closed since Gregory's disappearance, the staff sent home, with apologetic explanations and promises of reopening soon. Fiona ran her fingers over the smooth countertop, where Gregory had taught Talia to roll pasta dough on Sunday afternoons, their laughter filling the kitchen with warmth. Now, only the distant sound of waves crashing against the harbor wall broke the silence. "We'll reopen tomorrow," she announced to the empty room, her voice echoing against the tile walls. "We have to." She had no formal training, no business knowledge, and only 6 months to save everything they had built. But looking around at the restaurant that had been the heart of their family, Fiona knew she had no choice. She would fight with everything she had, for the Lighthouse, for their home, but most of all for Talia. What Fiona couldn't know as she stood in that darkened kitchen was that the battle ahead would demand more than just hard work and determination. It would require her to confront painful truths, to rediscover herself in the wreckage of her marriage, and ultimately to make a choice between her own happiness and her daughter's future. In Newport, Rhode Island, where old money whispered behind closed doors and tradition weighed as heavily as the fog that rolled in from the Atlantic, Fiona Cartwright was about to challenge everything she had ever believed about love, loyalty, and the price of starting over. Sleep eluded Fiona that night as plans and fears battled in her mind. By morning, her hands gripped the steering wheel of their aging station wagon, knuckles white as she drove to the seafood market. The first step in reopening the Lighthouse would be securing fresh supplies, even if it meant using the last of her personal savings. At Harborside Market, Fiona stood out among the weathered fishermen and seasoned restaurant buyers. Her linen, dress and careful makeup, armor she had donned for courage, felt ridiculous as she attempted to negotiate prices for the day's catch. Each stumbling question revealed her inexperience, earning pitying glances from vendors who had dealt with Gregory for years. "Mrs. Cartwright," called out Simpson, their regular supplier, his weathered face creased with concern. "Haven't seen you down here before. Where's Gregory?" The question sliced through her practiced composure. He's Away on business, she lied, the words bitter on her tongue. I'll be handling the restaurant for a while. Simpson's doubtful expression said what his words didn't. No one left their thriving restaurant during peak tourist season. Rumors had already begun swirling through Newport's tight-knit community. Fiona could feel them circling like gulls, waiting to feed on the carcass of her failed marriage. By mid-afternoon, Fiona had managed to secure enough supplies for a limited menu. Her hands, once manicured to perfection, now smelled of fish and bore a small cut from an over-enthusiastic attempt to help fillet a base. Reality was setting in with every passing hour. Running the lighthouse would require her to become someone entirely new. As she loaded the last of the supplies into the car, a deep voice called out to her. "Need a hand with that?" Fiona turned to see a man she didn't recognize, tall with salt and pepper hair and eyes the color of the ocean during a storm. His weathered hands suggested a life spent on boats, but his tailored shirt hinted at more than just a fisherman's wage. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied automatically, struggling to lift a crate of mussels. The stranger stepped forward anyway, effortlessly taking the crate from her arms. "I'm Nathan Davies," he said, placing the seafood in her car. "New supplier in town. Just took over my father's business." Fiona nodded, too overwhelmed to engage in pleasantries. "Thank you, Mr. Davies, but we have a regular supplier." "Nathan, please," he insisted, his smile reaching his eyes. "And Simpson mentioned you might be looking for better prices given the circumstances." Heat flooded Fiona's cheeks. Of course, Simpson had talked. Everyone was talking. "I appreciate your help, but I really must get back to the restaurant," she said stiffly, closing the car trunk with more force than necessary. Nathan handed her a business card. "My prices are 15% lower than Simpson's, and I deliver. Just something to consider, Mrs. Cartwright." As Fiona drove back to the lighthouse, Nathan's card burned a hole in her pocket. His offer was exactly what she needed financially, but accepting help felt dangerously close to admitting how desperate their situation truly was. Back at the restaurant, Fiona found Talia sitting at the bar, scrolling through her phone with vacant eyes. Since Gregory's disappearance, Talia had withdrawn completely, skipping school, ignoring friends, and barely speaking to Fiona. "I bought supplies," Fiona announced with forced cheerfulness. "We're reopening tonight, limited menu, just the classics." Talia didn't look up. "What's the point? Everyone knows Dad left us. No one's going to come." The truth in her daughters. Words stung, but Fiona pressed on. "They'll come for the lobster rolls, if nothing else. And I need your help. You know how to work the register better than I do." "So I should drop out of school to save Dad's restaurant?" Talia's voice dripped with sarcasm. "The restaurant he cared about more than us." "That's not fair," Fiona said, though a voice inside whispered that perhaps Talia wasn't entirely wrong. How many family dinners had Gregory missed for the restaurant? How many school events had he skipped? Talia finally looked up, her eyes, so like her father's, filled with accusation. "You never saw it coming because you never wanted to see it. He told me he was unhappy months ago." The revelation hit Fiona like a physical blow. "He... What? Talia, why didn't you say anything?" "He made me promise not to. He said he was trying to fix things." Talia's voice cracked. "I guess he decided we weren't worth fixing." Fiona reached for her daughter, but Talia shrank away, sliding off the bar stool. "I have homework," she muttered, heading for the stairs that led to their apartment above the restaurant. Alone again, Fiona began preparing the kitchen with mechanical movements. 20 years of watching Gregory had taught her the basics, but theory was different from practice. The first batch of chowder scorched at the bottom. The bread rolls came, out dense and undercooked. By opening time at 5 o'clock, Fiona's confidence was as deflated as her failed soufflé. To her surprise, a few regulars did come, mostly older couples who had watched Talia grow up between these tables. They ordered simply and tipped generously, their eyes filled with a pity that made Fiona's skin crawl. By the end of the night, they had served fewer than 20 customers. The register held enough to cover the day's supplies, but nothing more. As Fiona wiped down the last table, the bell above the door chimed. Her polite refusal died on her lips as Gregory's mother, Vivian Cartwright, swept in like an Arctic front. At 70, Vivian remained a formidable presence in Newport society. Nigdy wcześniej nie słyszała tych historii, a teraz odkrywała nową twarz swojej matki, odważną, zaangażowaną, pełną pasji. Gdy wieści o poprawie stanu zdrowia matki Pauliny dotarły do jej rodzeństwa, ich reakcje były mieszane. Rafał, dyrektor marketingu pracujący w Nowym Jorku, widział w tym potencjał biznesowy. Podczas kolejnej wideorozmowy nie mógł powstrzymać się od dzielenia swoimi pomysłami. Paulina, te historie mamy to złoto. Moglibyśmy stworzyć wokół nich całą narrację marketingową. Wyobraź sobie wypieki z historią, cykl wypieków inspirowanych ważnymi wydarzeniami z Gdańska i osobistymi historiami mamy. Sylwia, konsultantka turystyczna z Krakowa, natychmiast podchwyciła pomysł. To mogłoby świetnie wpisać się w mój projekt szlaku kulinarnego. Turystyka kulinarna połączona z historią zawsze przyciąga ludzi. Tymczasem Tomasz, bankier z Warszawy, pozostawał najbardziej powściągliwy. Ale czy to nie będzie zbyt wiele dla mamy i dla ciebie, Paulina? Już i tak dźwigasz tak wiele na swoich barkach. Paulina słuchała ich propozycji z mieszanymi uczuciami. Z jednej strony cieszyła się zaangażowaniem rodzeństwa i ich entuzjazmem, z drugiej obawiała się, że znów zostanie sama z realizacją wszystkich pomysłów i opieką nad matką. A jeszcze dzisiaj musi dać ostateczną odpowiedź krytykowi kulinarnemu w sprawie wywiadu w Warszawie. Jak podejmie tę decyzję? Następnego ranka, gdy Paulina przygotowywała ciasto na serniki w kuchni, usłyszała dzwonek do drzwi. Na progu stał Tomasz, z walizką w ręku i niepewnym uśmiechem na twarzy. Wziąłem urlop, powiedział wchodząc do środka. Miesiąc. Może dłużej, jeśli będzie trzeba. Pomyślałem, że pora zacząć spłacać mój dług wobec ciebie. Paulina stała oniemiała, z rękami pokrytymi mąką, nie wiedząc, czy wierzyć własnym uszom. Tomasz nigdy nie brał urlopu. Nawet na ślub Sylwii wpadł tylko na weekend, tłumacząc się ważnymi spotkaniami w banku. I jest jeszcze coś, kontynuował, wyciągając z kieszeni kopertę. To bilety do Warszawy dla ciebie, na wywiad. Zarezerwowałem też pokój w hotelu. Ja zajmę się mamą, a ty jedź i pokaż im, jak wyjątkowe są twoje wypieki. Łzy napłynęły do oczu Pauliny, gdy przyjmowała kopertę. Po raz pierwszy od ponad roku poczuła, że ciężar, który niosła, staje się lżejszy. Jednak zamiast natychmiastowej ulgi pojawił się niepokój. Jak mama zareaguje na jej nieobecność? Czy Tomasz naprawdę sobie poradzi? A może to tylko chwilowy zapał, który szybko minie? Wieczorem, gdy rodzeństwo siedziało razem przy herbacie i świeżo upieczonym makowcu, Paulina odważyła się podzielić swoimi obawami. Ku jej zaskoczeniu, to matka przerwała rozmowę. Paulinko, powiedziała cichym, ale stanowczym głosem. Jedź, zasługujesz na to, a ja będę tutaj, gdy wrócisz. Z twoim bratem i tymi wszystkimi plotkującymi staruszkami, które teraz są tu codziennie. Wszyscy się roześmiali, a Paulina poczuła, jak coś w niej pęka. Mur, który zbudowała wokół swojego serca, chroniąc się przed rozczarowaniem. Może rzeczywiście nadszedł czas, by zaufać swojej rodzinie na nowo. Co z tego wyniknie, gdy Paulina w końcu opuści dom, by skupić się na sobie i swoich marzeniach? Warszawa powitała Paulinę chłodnym, jesiennym deszczem. Stojąc przed eleganckim budynkiem redakcji magazynu kulinarnego, czuła się nie na miejscu. Mała piekarnia z Gdańska w wielkim świecie wysokiej gastronomii. Jednak gdy tylko weszła do środka i rozpakowała swoje wypieki, atmosfera zmieniła się jak za dotknięciem czarodziejskiej różdżki. To są właśnie te serniki, o których słyszałam tyle wspaniałości? Zapytała elegancka kobieta w średnim wieku, przedstawiając się jako Krystyna, redaktor naczelna magazynu. I ten zapach przypomina mi dom mojej babci w Kazimierzu. Wywiad i sesja zdjęciowa przebiegły lepiej, niż Paulina mogła marzyć. Jej proste, szczere opowieści o tym, jak pieczenie stało się dla niej formą terapii i sposobem na łączenie pokoleń, wyraźnie poruszyły zespół magazynu. Krystyna, szczególnie zainteresowana koncepcją wypieków z historią, zaproponowała cykliczną rubrykę, w której Paulina mogłaby dzielić się przepisami i historiami stojącymi za nimi. Nie szukamy tylko przepisów, wyjaśniła Krystyna. Szukamy autentyczności, tradycji i historii, które poruszają serca. a twoje wypieki i historie robią właśnie to. Podczas gdy Paulina przeżywała swój triumf w Warszawie, Tomasz mierzył się z wyzwaniami opieki nad matką. Mimo jego najlepszych intencji, pierwszy dzień sam na sam z chorą rodzicielką okazał się testem cierpliwości i praktycznych umiejętności, których wcześniej nie potrzebował w świecie finansów. Mamo, gdzie Paulina trzyma twoje lekarstwa? Pytał, przeszukując szafki w łazience. I jak często powinnaś je brać? Matka, siedząc w fotelu przy oknie, patrzyła na niego z mieszaniną rozbawienia i cierpliwości. W szufladzie nocnej szafki Paulina zostawiła szczegółowy harmonogram na lodówce. And it's easier to blame you than to accept that Gregory might have just left. So what am I supposed to do? Fiona asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Crawl away in shame for something I didn't do? Charlotte reached across the bar to squeeze Fiona's hand, a gesture so reminiscent of their old friendship that it brought tears to Fiona's eyes. I don't know, but the Preservation Society meeting is tomorrow night, and several members have suggested removing you from the events committee. I thought you should be prepared. After Charlotte left, promising to call soon but both of them knowing she wouldn't, Fiona remained at the bar, staring at the wedding photo that still hung behind the cash register. Gregory smiled down at her, handsome and confident at 22, his arm around her waist as they cut their wedding cake in this very room, before the lighthouse was theirs, when it still belonged to his parents. How had they gone from that joyful moment to this? How had the community that once embraced her now turned so quickly to condemnation? When the kitchen door swung open, Fiona hurriedly wiped her eyes. Eduardo, their longtime chef, who had agreed to stay on for reduced pay, emerged with concern etched on his weathered face. Mrs. Cartwright, we have problem, he said in his heavily accented English. Seafood delivery no come today. Simpson say account closed until past bills paid. It was one more blow on an already devastating day. Without fresh seafood, they couldn't serve half the menu. Call around to the other suppliers, Fiona instructed, though she knew most would refuse for the same reason. As Eduardo disappeared back into the kitchen, the bell above the door chimed again. Fiona looked up, her customer service smile automatically fixing itself to her face despite her inner turmoil. Nathan Davies stood in the doorway, a crate of fresh seafood in his arms and an easy smile on his face. Heard you might be in a bind, he said, setting the crate on the nearest table. Thought I'd take a chance and stop by. Relief flooded through Fiona, quickly followed by suspicion. Did Simpson call you? Nathan's smile dimmed slightly. Word travels fast on the docks. Simpson's a good man, but business is business. He gestured to the crate. Haddock, scallops, and those mussels you were buying last week. Consider it a sample of what Davies Seafood can offer. Fiona approached the crate cautiously. The seafood was impeccable, fresher even than what Simpson usually provided. This is very kind, but I'm not sure when I can pay you. Our situation is complicated. I know about complicated, Nathan replied, his voice gentle. Lost my wife 5 years ago, raising a teenage son alone. Had to rebuild my entire life. He shrugged, as if these monumentally difficult experiences were simply part of living. Payment terms can be flexible for the right customer. There was something in his directness that cut through Fiona's defenses. Unlike the pitying glances of former friends or the cold judgment of Vivian, Nathan looked at her as if he actually saw her, not as Gregory's abandoned wife or the lighthouse's failing proprietor, but simply as a woman doing her best in impossible circumstances. Why would you help me? She asked bluntly. You don't know me. Nathan considered this, head tilted slightly. Maybe I recognize a fighter when I see one, or maybe I just make better business decisions than Simpson. His eyes crinkled with humor. Either way, you need seafood and I have seafood. The rest we can figure out as we go. For the first time in weeks, Fiona felt a flicker of something other than despair, a small spark that might have been hope or perhaps just gratitude for a moment of simple human kindness in a storm of judgment and abandonment. Thank you, she said finally, extending her hand. I accept your offer, Mr. Davies. Nathan, he corrected, his hand warm and calloused against hers. And you're welcome, Fiona. That evening the lighthouse served the best seafood it had offered since Gregory's departure. Nathan's delivery allowed Eduardo to prepare his signature cioppino, and the rich, fragrant stew drew in passers-by who hadn't planned to dine there. Word of mouth brought in a few more customers than usual, and by closing time, Fiona felt the first tentative stirrings of accomplishment. As she climbed the stairs to their apartment above the restaurant, exhaustion weighed on her like a physical burden. She paused outside Talia's door, hearing the soft sounds of crying from within. Since her revelation about Gregory's confessions of unhappiness, Talia had retreated further into herself, attending school but participating minimally, her grades slipping from their usual excellence. Fiona knocked softly. "Talia, can I come in?" Silence greeted her, then a muffled, "Whatever." The bedroom was dark, except for the blue glow of a laptop screen. Talia lay curled on her bed, arms wrapped around herself as if holding together something that threatened to shatter. Fiona sat gently on the edge of the bed, careful not to touch her daughter, knowing from recent experience that physical comfort would be rejected. "We had a better night at the restaurant," Fiona said, searching for any neutral topic. "Eduardo made cioppino." Talia's voice was thick with tears. "Dad's favorite." "Yes," Fiona acknowledged, the memory bittersweet. "He always said Eduardo's cioppino was better than anything in Italy." "Mrs. Grayson called me into her office today," Talia said abruptly, referring to the school counselor. "She wanted to know if everything was okay at home, if you were coping appropriately." The bitterness in her tone made her sound far older than 16. "Everyone's talking about us, Mum. About you." Fiona swallowed hard. "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry. Grandmother says we should move in with her, that you can't handle the restaurant and that we're going to lose everything." Talia finally rolled over to face her mother, eyes red-rimmed and accusing. "Is that true? Are we going to lose our home?" The question hung between them, demanding honesty that Fiona wasn't sure she could give without breaking down completely. "I'm doing everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen," she said carefully. "The restaurant had a good night tonight. Things might be turning around." "You're not answering my question," Talia said, her perception always uncomfortably acute. "Dad always said you avoid hard truths by talking around them." The observation stung, partly because it contained a grain of truth. Fiona had always been the optimist in their marriage, preferring to focus on solutions rather than dwelling on problems. Had Gregory seen that as avoidance? Had her positive outlook felt like dismissal of his concerns? "The truth is, I don't know," Fiona admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're behind on payments. The bank has given us 6 months. I'm learning as fast as I can, but you're not Dad," Talia finished for her. "No," Fiona agreed, "I'm not. But I'm here, Talia. I didn't leave." The words came out sharper than intended, frustration breaking through her careful composure. Talia's face crumpled. "He told me he was unhappy, but I never thought he'd actually go. I should have told you what he said. Maybe you could have fixed things." The guilt in her daughter's voice broke Fiona's heart. She reached out, and this time Talia didn't pull away, as Fiona gathered her into a fierce hug. "This is not your fault," she whispered into her daughter's hair. "None of this is your fault. Your father made his choices, and they are not your burden to carry." As Talia sobbed against her shoulder, Fiona made a silent promise. Somehow she would save their home and the restaurant. Somehow she would protect her daughter from both financial ruin and the cruelty of Newport's social judgment. Whatever it took, whatever she had to become, she would not let Gregory's abandonment define their future. Later that night, after Talia had fallen into exhausted sleep, Fiona stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the harbour lights reflecting on the dark water. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Preservation Society meeting where she would likely be publicly humiliated, another day of learning the business Gregory had kept to himself, and the constant battle against Vivian's rumours. But tonight, for the first time since finding Gregory's note, Fiona allowed herself to acknowledge a painful truth. Along with the devastation and fear, she also felt an unexpected sense of liberation. 20 years of being Gregory's wife, of arranging her life around his needs and preferences, of being the perfect hostess and committee member and mother. It had all come crashing down. In the ruins, there might be space for her to discover who Fiona Cartwright could be on her own terms. It was a terrifying thought. It was also in its way exhilarating. Days bled into weeks as Fiona settled into a grueling routine. She rose before dawn to review the previous day's numbers and plan the day ahead. By 6, she was at the market, haggling with suppliers, including Nathan, whose seafood deliveries had become a reliable bright spot in her chaotic days. Mornings were spent prepping with Eduardo, afternoons managing the sparse lunch crowd, and evenings overseeing dinner service until midnight. Every free moment was consumed by paperwork, bills, and increasingly desperate attempts to boost business. The Preservation Committee had indeed removed her, citing personal circumstances that might distract from the Society's mission. Charlotte had delivered the news by text message, unable to face Fiona directly. One by one, invitations to charity events and community functions had stopped arriving. Newport's social circles had closed ranks, protecting their own from the contagion of a failed marriage and troubled business. Talia had begun working at the restaurant after school and on weekends, her initial resistance giving way to a grim determination that mirrored Fiona's own. Mother and daughter moved around each other in a carefully choreographed dance of shared purpose, if not always understanding. They spoke of practical matters, inventory, schedules, homework, but rarely about Gregory or the future that loomed beyond their 6-month deadline. 4 months after Gregory's disappearance, on a rainy Tuesday when the restaurant sat empty, save for 2 tourists seeking shelter from the downpour, Nathan arrived with his regular delivery and an unusual request. "Have dinner with me," he said without preamble, setting down crates of fresh scallops and clams. "Not here. Somewhere you can be a guest instead of the host." Fiona's automatic response was to refuse. She hadn't been anywhere but the restaurant, market and bank in months. The thought of sitting across from Nathan at a restaurant where everyone would see them together, where Vivian's whispers about affairs would seem confirmed, made her stomach clench with anxiety. Nathan seemed to read her thoughts. "My boat," he clarified. "Thursday night I'll cook. No audience, no gossip, just good food and maybe a conversation that doesn't involve invoices or menu planning." The offer was tempting precisely because it was so simple. A meal she didn't have to prepare. A conversation not weighted with judgment or financial pressure. A few hours where she could just be Fiona, not Mrs. Cartwright, the abandoned wife or the failing restaurant owner. "I can't leave Talia alone at night," she said, though the excuse sounded weak even to her own ears. Talia was 16, perfectly, capable of heating up leftovers and completing homework without supervision. "Bring her," Nathan suggested easily. "My son Josh is 17. They might hit it off, or at least tolerate each other while the adults talk." Fiona hesitated, searching for another reason to say no. Finding none that didn't reveal her fear of moving forward, of allowing any happiness into their precarious existence, she nodded slowly. "Thursday then, but nothing fancy. We don't do fancy anymore." Nathan's smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Noted. Casual boat dinner Thursday at 7. I'll pick you both up at the marina dock." That evening, when Fiona told Talia about the dinner invitation, she expected resistance. Instead, her daughter shrugged with the practiced indifference of adolescence and said, "Whatever. It's not like we have actual customers anyway." The resignation in Talia's voice hurt more than outright refusal would have. At 16, she should be worried about school dances and college applications, not the financial survival of their family business. "It might be good for us," Fiona ventured, "to get out of here for a few hours, to remember there's a world beyond these walls." Talia looked up from her textbook, something vulnerable flashing across her face before the teenage mask of cool detachment returned. "Is this like a date?" The question caught Fiona off guard. "No," she said quickly, "just dinner with a friend." The word felt strange on her tongue. When had she last thought of anyone as simply a friend, without the complex layers of Newport's social hierarchies coloring the relationship? "Dad's only been gone 4 months, Talia said, her voice carefully neutral. The implication stung. "This isn't a date," Fiona repeated more firmly. Nathan has been kind to us when most people haven't. That's all. Talia returned to her textbook, but not before Fiona caught the doubt in her eyes. For all her efforts to shield her daughter from Newport's gossip, Talia was clearly aware of the whispers. The thought that she might believe any of Vivian's lies about affairs was unbearable. "Your father made his choice," Fiona said softly. "He left us with nothing but debt and questions. I'm trying to rebuild what he destroyed, but that doesn't mean I'm replacing him. I don't know if I'll ever understand why he left, but I know it wasn't because of another man." Talia didn't look up. Maybe it would be easier if it was. At least, then there'd be a reason. The profound sadness in her daughter's voice broke something open in Fiona's chest. "Oh, Talia," she breathed, moving to sit beside her at the kitchen table. "There is never a good enough reason to abandon your family. Never." For a moment, they sat together in silence, the weight of Gregory's absence a physical presence between them. Then Talia closed her textbook with a decisive snap. "I'll need to borrow something to wear," she said, reverting to practical matters as they both did, when emotions threatened to overwhelm. "I've outgrown all my nice clothes." The observation was so normal, so teenage girl ordinary, that Fiona felt tears spring to her eyes. When was the last time they'd discussed anything as simple as clothes? "We'll find something," she promised, squeezing her daughter's hand. "Maybe we both need something new." Thursday arrived with unseasonably clear skies and a gentle breeze, perfect weather for a boat dinner. Fiona and Talia had spent a rare hour together the previous evening sorting through their closets, eventually settling on simple sundresses that somehow felt like costumes after months of practical work clothes. Standing on the marina dock at 7, Fiona fought the urge to turn back. What was she doing accepting a dinner invitation when the lighthouse needed every minute of her attention? What would people say if they saw her, seemingly carefree with Nathan while her business teetered on the edge of failure? Before she could act on her doubts, a sleek sailboat approached the dock, Nathan at the helm with a younger version of himself, presumably Josh, managing the lines. The boat was beautiful, clearly expensive, but not ostentatious, its wooden deck gleaming in the evening sun. "The Davies family yacht," Nathan called out as they approached, a self-deprecating smile suggesting he found the term as pretentious as Fiona did. "All 40 feet of her. Hop aboard." Josh secured the boat to the dock with practiced ease, then offered a hand to help Fiona and Talia aboard. The teenager's mumbled greeting and careful avoidance of eye contact with Talia was so typically adolescent that Fiona had to suppress a smile. Some things transcended social circles and family dramas. The evening unfolded with unexpected ease. Nathan served a simple but delicious meal of grilled fish and summer vegetables on the boat's open deck, the Newport skyline providing a backdrop of twinkling lights as the sun set. Josh, initially as reticent as Talia, gradually opened up when the conversation turned to music, the two teenagers discovering shared tastes that sent them to the boat's cabin to explore Josh's vinyl collection. Left alone on deck, Fiona found herself relaxing for the first time in months. Nathan was easy to talk to, his questions about her life before the lighthouse drawing out stories she hadn't thought about in years, her college dreams of becoming an art historian, her summer working as a gallery assistant in New York, the poetry she used to write late at night when Gregory was working at the restaurant. "You gave up a lot for your husband's dream," Nathan observed, refilling her wineglass. Fiona considered this. "I don't think I saw it that way at the time. The lighthouse was Gregory's family legacy. Running it together seemed romantic. And now? Now I wonder if I disappeared into his life so completely that he couldn't see me anymore," she admitted, the truth surfacing with surprising clarity. Or maybe he couldn't see himself in his own life, with all the expectations his family placed on him. Nathan's gaze was steady, free of judgment. "That's quite generous, considering he left you with all the consequences of his choices." The statement should have angered her, but instead Fiona felt a weight lift at having someone acknowledge the fundamental unfairness of her situation. "I'm trying to understand," she said. "For Talia's sake, if nothing else. She needs to believe." Her father had reasons, even if they weren't good enough. "And what do you need, Fiona?" Nathan asked, his voice gentle. The question caught her off guard. What did she need? For months, her focus had been entirely on survival, keeping the restaurant open, making minimum payments on their debts, ensuring Talia had some stability. The concept of her own needs had disappeared entirely. Time, she answered finally. Time to figure out who I am without Gregory. Time to decide if the lighthouse is really worth saving, or if it's just another piece of his life I'm clinging to out of habit. Nathan nodded, understanding in his eyes. Time is exactly what the bank won't give you. 6 weeks, Fiona confirmed, the deadline hanging over her like a guillotine blade. Unless a miracle happens, we lose everything in 6 weeks. What if there was another option? Nathan suggested, setting down his wine glass. What if you could keep the lighthouse but change it? Make it your restaurant instead of Gregory's? Fiona laughed softly. That would require money we don't have and expertise I'm still learning. I have both, Nathan said simply. I'm looking to invest in a restaurant. Local seafood straight from boat to table. It's a concept that would work well in Newport. The lighthouse has the perfect location and an established name despite recent challenges. Fiona stared at him, disbelief giving way to suspicion. Is that what this dinner is about? A business proposition? Nathan held her gaze, unflinching. The dinner is because I enjoy your company. The business proposition is because I respect your fight and believe in the lighthouse's potential. They're separate offers, Fiona. You can accept either, both, or neither. The straightforwardness of his approach was refreshing after months of whispers and judgment. Still, wariness kept Fiona from responding immediately. I'd need to think about it, she said finally. The lighthouse isn't just a business to us. It's our home, our history. Of course, Nathan nodded, understanding in his eyes. Take all. The time you need. Just remember, banks don't care about history or home. They care about numbers. Their conversation was interrupted by laughter from below deck, a sound so unexpected that Fiona nearly didn't recognize it as Talia's. When was the last time she'd heard her daughter laugh? The realization sent a pang through her chest. In fighting for their financial survival, had she overlooked Talia's emotional needs? The ride back to shore was quiet, both teenagers unusually subdued after their time together. As Nathan docked the boat, Fiona found herself reluctant to leave the peaceful bubble the evening had created. Thank you, she said simply as he helped her onto the dock. For dinner, or the business proposition? Nathan asked, his eyes crinkling with humor. For reminding me there's still a world outside our problems, Fiona replied honestly. As they walked back toward the lighthouse, Talia fell into step beside Fiona, her face thoughtful in the moonlight. Josh invited me to hear his band play Friday night, she said cautiously, at the coffee shop on Thames Street. Fiona's first instinct was to refuse. Friday nights were their busiest at the restaurant, meager as that business was. But the hesitant hope in Talia's eyes stopped her. If you help with lunch prep before you go, I think we can manage without you for the evening. Talia's surprised smile was worth more than any Friday night dinner revenue. The next morning, Fiona arrived at the market with Nathan's proposal weighing heavily on her mind. The opportunity was exactly what they needed financially, but the implications stretched far beyond business. Accepting his help would tangle her personal and professional lives in ways that could leave her vulnerable if his interest in either the restaurant or her waned. As she debated internally, a flash of platinum blonde hair caught her attention. Vivian Cartwright stood at a nearby stall, imperiously inspecting produce, while the vendor hastened to meet her exacting standards. When she turned and spotted Fiona, her perfectly arranged features hardened into disapproval. I saw you, Vivian said without preamble, approaching with quick, precise steps. On Nathan Davies's boat. The whole marina saw you. Fiona steeled herself. It was dinner, Vivian, with Talia and his son, hardly scandalous. Vivian's laugh held no warmth. You have no idea what you're getting involved in, do you? The Davies. Family has been feuding with the Cartwrights for generations. Their fishing operation nearly destroyed Gregory's grandfather's business in the 50s. And now you're consorting with them while wearing my son's wedding ring. The revelation stopped. Fiona Cold, a family feud. Nathan had never mentioned any connection to the Cartwrights, positive or negative. I didn't know, she admitted, hating how defensive she sounded. Nathan has been kind to us when few others have, including you." "Of course he has," Vivian scoffed. "The Davies family has wanted control of that harbor property for decades. Gregory's father refused to sell to them, and so did Gregory. Now Nathan has found an easier mark, hasn't he?" The insinuation stung, but a new worry overshadowed the insult. If what Vivian said was true, Nathan's interest in the lighthouse, and perhaps in her, was motivated by something far more calculated than simple business opportunity or personal connection. "Excuse me," Fiona murmured, turning away before Vivian could see the confusion on her face. "I have a restaurant to run." The rest of the day passed in a haze of doubt and second-guessing. Had Nathan's kindness been genuine, or was he simply exploiting their vulnerability to gain control of Prime Harbor real estate? The Davies-Cartwright feud explained why Gregory had never done business with Nathan's father, choosing Simpson instead, despite potentially higher prices. By closing time, Fiona was no closer to an answer. She stood at the restaurant's picture window, watching boats return to the harbor in the golden late-afternoon light. The lighthouse had the best view in Newport, a fact that suddenly seemed less like a blessing and more like a target. The bell above the door chimed, breaking her reverie. Fiona turned, customer service smile automatically in place, only to have it fade at the sight of Nathan standing in the entranceway, his expression uncharacteristically grave. "I should have told you about the family history," he said without preamble. "I heard Vivian found you at the market this morning." Newport's gossip network was as efficient as ever. Fiona crossed her arms, suddenly aware of how exposed she felt. Yes, she did. She had quite a lot to say about the Davies family's interest in Cartwright property. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "It's not what you think. May I?" He gestured to a table, asking permission to sit rather than assuming it as most men of his position would. Fiona hesitated, then nodded. They sat across from each other, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the empty dining room. "My father and Gregory's father hated each other," Nathan began, his directness unchanged despite the difficult subject. "Their fathers hated each other before them. Something about boats being sabotaged during Prohibition, though the story changes depending on who tells it. Ancient history that somehow never got left in the past." "And yet you never mentioned this history when offering to do business with Gregory's wife," Fiona pointed out, keeping her voice level despite the hurt and anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Because it's not my history," Nathan replied firmly. "I left Newport after high school, built my business in Boston, married, had Josh. I only came back after Elaine died to give my son some family connection. My father passed the business to me, but he didn't pass on his grudges. I was hoping this generation could move beyond them." His explanation made sense, but doubt lingered. "And your interest in the lighthouse? Is that also free of family history?" Nathan met her gaze directly. "My interest in the lighthouse is a business decision. My interest in you has nothing to do with business or family names." He hesitated, then added, "But I understand if you can't separate the two. Trust is earned, not given, and you've had enough betrayal for one lifetime." The simple acknowledgement of her situation without pity or judgment disarmed her. How long had it been since anyone had seen her struggle clearly, without filtering it through Newport's social lens or their own agenda? "I need time," Fiona said finally, "to think about the business proposition, to decide what's best for Talia and me." Nathan nodded, rising from the table. "Take all the time you need. The offer stands, regardless of anything else between us." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Fiona, I think you're doing an incredible job here. Gregory was a fool to leave, and an even bigger fool to stay away." After he left, Fiona remained at the table, thoughts swirling. Nathan's business offer would solve their immediate financial problems and give her breathing room to learn the restaurant business properly. But accepting would further complicate her already precarious position in Newport society and potentially drag Talia into a generations-old feud she didn't deserve. More troubling was her growing attraction to Nathan himself. After 20 years of marriage to one man, the idea of connection with another was both thrilling and terrifying, especially when that connection came wrapped in business proposals and family rivalries. The sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Talia's arrival. Her daughter appeared in the doorway, dressed for her outing with Josh, a tentative happiness softening her features. "You look beautiful," Fiona said, pushing her worries aside. Talia ducked her head, unused to compliments after months of crisis. "It's just coffee and music, no big deal." "It's nice to see you doing something fun," Fiona replied gently. "You deserve some normal teenage experiences, even in the middle of all this." Talia twisted her hands together, a nervous gesture she'd had since childhood. "I saw Mr. Davies leaving. Was he here about business?" The hesitation in her voice told Fiona that Talia too had heard the gossip. "Yes, he made an offer to invest in the lighthouse. It could help us keep the restaurant and our home." "Are you going to accept?" Talia asked, her expression carefully neutral. Fiona sighed, too exhausted for anything but honesty. "I don't know yet. There are complications." "Because of grandmother?" Talia's perception was uncomfortably accurate. "She called me today, said we should be careful about aligning ourselves with the wrong people." I didn't really get what she meant. "It's an old family disagreement," Fiona explained, unwilling to burden her daughter with the full weight of Newport's intergenerational grudges. "Nothing for you to worry about." Talia's expression suggested she didn't quite believe this simplification, but she let it pass. "Whatever you decide about the restaurant, I just want us to be okay. Both of us." The maturity in her daughter's voice brought tears to Fiona's eyes. At 16, Talia should be focused on herself, on building her own future. Instead, she was worried about her mother's well-being amid their financial crisis. "We will be," Fiona promised, rising to embrace her daughter. "Now go have fun. Be a teenager for a few hours. The restaurant and all its problems will still be here tomorrow." After Talia left, Fiona retreated to her office, the small room off the kitchen that had once been Gregory's domain. His presence lingered here most, strongly, in the nautical charts framed on the walls and the antique barometer that had belonged to his grandfather. She sat at the desk, pulling out account ledgers and bank statements, searching for any solution that didn't involve Nathan Davies. The numbers remained stubbornly unchanged. Without significant investment, the lighthouse would be foreclosed. On within weeks. The summer tourist season that should have been their salvation had been decimated by Newport's social warfare, leaving them treading water financially when they needed to be swimming strongly toward shore. A knock at the restaurant's back door interrupted her calculations. Eduardo stood there, still in his chef's whites despite having left hours earlier. "Mrs. Cartwright," he said, his weathered face unusually animated, "I must show you something." He thrust a smartphone into her hands, open to a popular food blog. On the screen was a glowing review of the lighthouse, accompanied by mouth-watering photos of Eduardo's seafood paella and the harbor view at sunset. "Felix Morales," Eduardo explained, his accent thickening with excitement. "Very famous food. Blogger from New York. He come today for lunch. I recognize him, give him special paella. He post this 1 hour ago." Fiona read with growing amazement. The review praised the lighthouse's authentic coastal cuisine and refreshingly unpretentious atmosphere. It highlighted Eduardo's talents and even mentioned Fiona by name, commending her for maintaining quality despite challenging circumstances, a diplomatic reference to Gregory's departure that somehow made her sound resilient rather than abandoned. Most importantly, it directed New York weekenders and summer tourists to visit the lighthouse for the most honest seafood experience in Newport. The post already had hundreds of comments and shares. "This is amazing, Eduardo," Fiona breathed, hope blooming for the first time in months. "This could be exactly what we need." The chef beamed with pride. "Mr. Felix say he coming back next weekend with friends. Say we must save table with best view." After Eduardo left, Fiona reread the review several times, hardly daring to believe. Their luck. One positive review from an influential blogger wouldn't solve all their problems, but it could bring in the customers they desperately needed. With increased revenue, perhaps they could negotiate better terms with the bank, buy more time to decide about Nathan's offer. Speaking of Nathan. Fiona hesitated, then pulled out her phone. Whatever complicated feelings existed between them, he deserved to know about this development before she made any decisions about his investment offer. His response to her text was immediate. "Fantastic news, well-deserved recognition. This calls for celebration. Dinner tomorrow?" Fiona stared at his message, torn between caution and the desire to share this moment of victory with someone who would truly understand its significance. Before she could reply, another text arrived from an unknown number. "Saw the Morales. Review impressive. We should talk. I'm in town for the weekend. G." The single initial sent a jolt through Fiona's body. Gregory. After 5 months of silence, he chose now to reappear. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Had he been watching, from afar, waiting until the lighthouse showed signs of life before making contact? Anger rose in her throat, hot and unexpected. How dare he reach out now when she and Talia had finally begun to rebuild their lives from the wreckage he'd left behind? How dare he assume she would want to talk after his abandonment? She set the phone down without replying to either message. Tomorrow she would need to tell Talia that her father had made contact. Tomorrow she would need to decide whether to meet with Gregory, what to say to Nathan, how to capitalize on the positive. Review. But tonight she would allow herself to savor this small victory, earned through her own perseverance and Eduardo's talent, not through Gregory's connections or Nathan's investment. The lighthouse hadn't been saved yet, but for the first time, Fiona believed it could be, and on her own terms. The blogger's review worked its magic quickly. By Friday evening, the lighthouse had a waiting list for the first time since Gregory's departure. Tourists and locals alike filled the dining room, curious to see if the food lived up to the online praise. Eduardo rose to the occasion, his paella selling out by 8 o'clock. Even Talia seemed buoyed by the restaurant's sudden popularity, volunteering to help serve desserts despite her plans with Josh later. Amid the welcome chaos, Fiona barely had time to think about Gregory's text or Nathan's dinner invitation. She had responded to neither, focusing instead on ensuring their unexpected customers left satisfied and eager to return. As the dinner rush finally began to slow, Fiona stepped outside for a moment of fresh air. The summer evening was perfect, warm with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of salt water and blooming roses from the harbour garden. She leaned against the restaurant's weathered, clapboard siding, savouring the temporary peace. "It looks like business is improving." The voice froze her in place. After 20 years of marriage, she would know that deep, slightly raspy tone anywhere. Slowly, Fiona turned to face the man who had walked away from their life together. Gregory. Cartwright stood a few feet away, hands in the pockets of expensive trousers that looked newly purchased. His hair was shorter than when he'd left, his face more tanned, but his eyes, the same deep blue as Talia's, were unchanged, watching her with an unreadable expression. "What are you doing here?" Fiona asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Gregory gestured toward the packed restaurant. "I saw the review, thought it might be a good time to talk." 5 months, Fiona said, disbelief giving way to anger. 5 months of silence. You abandoned us with nothing but debt and a failing business, and now you want to talk because a food blogger liked our paella? His wince suggested he'd expected her anger but hadn't prepared for its intensity. "I know I have a lot to explain, a lot to apologize for. I was hoping we could go somewhere private." "I'm working," Fiona cut him off, gesturing to the restaurant. "Someone has to. We can't all just walk away when things get difficult." The criticism landed squarely, Gregory's face flushing with what might have been shame. "You're right. Of course you're right. Is Talia here? Could I see her at least?" Protectiveness surged through Fiona. "That's not my decision to make. Talia is old enough to decide for herself if she wants to see you." Before Gregory could respond, the restaurant door opened behind them. Talia stepped out, her server's apron still tied around her waist, her expression frozen in shock as she recognized her father. "Dad?" The word emerged as barely more than a whisper. Gregory turned, his face softening at the sight of his daughter. "Talia, you look so grown up." For a moment no one moved. Then Talia launched herself forward, colliding with her father in a fierce hug that seemed equal parts relief and fury. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs as Gregory held her, his own, eyes closing against visible emotion. Fiona stepped back, giving them space for this reunion while remaining close enough to intervene if Talia needed her. The sight of her daughter in her father's arms awakened a complex tangle of emotions. Relief that Talia could have this moment, resentment that Gregory could reappear and be welcomed so easily, and a strange emptiness where her own anger had burned so hotly just moments before. Eventually Talia pulled back, wiping tears from her face with the back of her hand. "Where were you?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you call or text or anything?" Gregory glanced at Fiona, then back to his daughter. "It's complicated. Sweetheart, I want to explain everything to both of you, but maybe not right here in the parking lot." The restaurant door opened again, this time revealing Nathan. He stopped abruptly when he saw the tableau before him. Fiona standing apart from Gregory and Talia, tension visible in every line of her body. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Nathan said carefully, his eyes moving between Fiona and the man he'd correctly identified as her returned husband. "Eduardo was looking for you. Something about running out of scallops." "Thank you, Nathan," Fiona replied, grateful for the excuse to escape this overwhelming moment. "I'll be right in." She turned to Talia and Gregory. "I need to handle this. Talia, we close at 11 if you want to. Continue your conversation with your father." As Fiona followed Nathan into the restaurant, she felt Gregory's eyes on her back. 5 months ago, his return would have been everything she wanted. Now, it was just one more complication in a life already overflowing with difficult choices. Inside, Nathan touched her elbow lightly. "That was Gregory." Fiona nodded, suddenly exhausted. He saw the review, decided it was time to come back and explain. Something hardened in Nathan's expression. Convenient timing, right when the restaurant shows signs of recovery. The observation echoed Fiona's own thoughts so precisely that she almost smiled. "Eduardo really needs help with the scallops?" "No," Nathan admitted, "but you looked like you needed a graceful exit." He hesitated, then added, "I can leave if you'd prefer to handle this family situation privately." The consideration in his offer touched her. "Stay," Fiona said impulsively. "Please, I could use a friend tonight." By the time the last customer left and the kitchen was cleaned, it was nearly midnight. Talia had texted that she was going to Vivian's house with Gregory, a development that worried Fiona, but that she couldn't reasonably prevent. Her daughter deserved answers that only Gregory could provide. Nathan had stayed, helping with everything, from opening wine bottles when their part-time server became overwhelmed to fixing a leaking pipe in the kitchen. Now he sat at the bar as Fiona counted the night's receipts, the best they'd had since before Gregory left. "What will you do if he wants to come back?" Nathan asked, the question hanging between them with all its implications. Fiona's hands stilled over the cash register. "I don't know," she admitted. 24 hours ago I was trying to decide whether to accept your business offer or lose everything to the bank. Now Gregory's back. The restaurant had its best night in months and She trailed off, unable to articulate the storm of confusion inside her. "Overwhelmed," Nathan supplied gently. "Anyone would be." Fiona nodded, grateful for his understanding. "I need to know why he left, why he stayed away so long. I need to know what he expects now that he's back." She looked up at Nathan, a realization settling over her. But whatever his reasons, they don't change what happened. They don't erase these 5 months. Nathan's expression remained carefully neutral. "No, they don't. 5 months ago I was just Gregory's wife," Fiona continued, thinking aloud. "I had no idea how to run a business, no confidence in my ability to stand on my own. Now you've done what most people said was impossible," Nathan finished for her. "You kept the lighthouse alive against all odds. That's not something you should give up lightly, even for family reconciliation." His words crystallized something Fiona had been feeling, but couldn't express. In fighting for the lighthouse, she had discovered strengths she never knew she possessed. Returning to her old role as simply Gregory's wife and hostess would mean surrendering the independence she had so painfully won. Before she could respond, the door opened again. Gregory stood in the entrance, older and somehow smaller than the man who had dominated her life for 20 years. Without Talia between them, the distance felt even greater. Talia's at Mother's for the night, he said, then noticed Nathan. His expression tightened. I didn't realize you had company. Nathan was helping with the dinner rush, Fiona explained, disliking the defensive note in her voice. Nathan, this is my husband, Gregory. Gregory, this is Nathan Davies. The men regarded each other with barely concealed hostility, generations of family rivalry surfacing in their stiff nods of acknowledgement. Davies, Gregory said coldly. I see you wasted no time moving in when the opportunity presented itself. Nathan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained even. The only opportunity I saw was a talented woman fighting to save her family's livelihood, while you were nowhere to be found. The tension in the room thickened. Fiona stepped between them, suddenly tired of men making decisions that affected her life. That's enough from both of you. Nathan, thank you for your help tonight. I can handle things from here. Nathan hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave her alone with Gregory. Finally, he nodded. Call if you need anything, anything at all. The emphasis wasn't lost on either Fiona or Gregory. After Nathan left, silence filled the restaurant. Gregory moved further inside, his eyes taking in the subtle changes Fiona had made. New curtains sewn from fabric on sale, local artwork replacing expensive prints, tables rearranged to maximize the harbor view. The place looks good, he offered. Different but good. Fiona crossed her arms. Why are you here, Gregory? Really? He sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 45 years. I saw the blog post. Your name was there, not mine. The lighthouse is thriving under your management. It made me realize, he paused, seeming to search for words. It made me realize that I might truly have lost everything. You didn't lose anything, Fiona replied sharply. You threw it away. There's a difference. Gregory nodded, accepting the rebuke. I know. I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, how badly I hurt you and Talia. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, placing it on the table between them. This is why I left. Fiona made no move to take it. A letter? After 5 months you think a letter explains anything? It's not a letter. It's bank statements and loan documents. Gregory pushed the envelope toward her. I was in trouble, Fiona. Serious trouble. Gambling debts that I kept hidden from you. From everyone. Cold dread pooled in Fiona's stomach. How much? Almost 200,000. His voice was barely audible. I borrowed from the wrong people. When I couldn't pay, they threatened to hurt you and Talia if I didn't give them what they wanted. The revelation struck Fiona like a physical blow. So you ran, left us with nothing, not even an explanation. I left to protect you, Gregory insisted, leaning forward. These weren't people who made empty threats. They wanted the lighthouse. Said they'd forgive the debt if I signed it over. But it isn't just mine to give, it's your home, Talia's inheritance. I couldn't do that to you. So instead you abandoned us to possible foreclosure? Fiona's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. Left us vulnerable to losing everything anyway. Gregory ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Fiona's heart ache despite her anger. I thought I could earn enough to pay them back before that happened. I've been working 3 jobs in Florida, living on nothing, sending every penny to pay down the debt. He tapped the envelope. It's all there. Proof of payments. Current. Balance. I've paid back over half. With the insurance money from selling my car, I can clear another quarter. Fiona finally reached for the envelope, needing to see the evidence of this incredible story for herself. As she scanned the documents, the pieces began to fall into place, the gradual emptying of their accounts that she had attributed to business losses, the late-night phone calls Gregory had claimed were from suppliers, his increasing anxiety in the months before his disappearance. Why didn't you tell me? She asked finally, looking up from the papers. We could have faced this together. Gregory's laugh held no humor. Tell you that I'd gambled away our savings, put our home and business at risk, that I'd borrowed money from people who operate outside the law. I was ashamed, Fiona, and terrified of what they might do if I didn't pay. So you left us to deal with the consequences alone. The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. I left you without the target on your back, Gregory corrected gently. As long as I was gone, making regular payments they had no reason to bother. You or Talia, it was the only way I could think to keep you both safe while I fixed my mistake. The explanation made a twisted kind of sense, but it didn't erase the pain of the past 5 months. You could have left a better explanation. Something other than, "I can't do this anymore." "If you'd known the truth, would you have let me go?" Gregory asked quietly. "Or would you have insisted on fighting this together, putting yourself in their path?" Fiona knew the answer without having to consider it. She would have refused to let him face such danger alone. Her protective instincts would have placed her squarely between her family and any threat, exactly where Gregory hadn't wanted her to be. "Does Talia know all this?" she asked instead of answering his question. Gregory nodded. "I told her tonight. She deserved the truth, even the ugly parts." His expression softened. "She's become so strong, Fiona, like her mother." The compliment caught Fiona off guard. During their marriage, Gregory had valued her social graces and supportive nature more than her strength. That he recognized it now after she'd been forced to develop it in his absence felt like too little, too late. "What happens now?" Fiona asked, the question encompassing far more than just the remaining debt. Gregory leaned back in his chair, his expression cautious. "I've been offered a management position at a restaurant in Miami. Good salary, regular hours. With that income, I could pay off the rest of the debt within a year." He hesitated, then added, "You and Talia could join me there. Fresh start, away from Newport gossip and old family feuds." The suggestion hung in the air between them. 6 months ago, Fiona might have agreed immediately, grateful for any solution that kept their family intact. Now the thought of leaving the lighthouse, after all she had sacrificed to save it, after discovering her own capability within its walls, felt like surrendering something precious. "I need time," she said finally. "This is a lot to process." Gregory nodded, relief visible in his features. It wasn't a rejection, at least. "Of course, I'm staying at Mother's for now. I've missed enough work already, but I don't have to go back to Miami until Monday." After he left, Fiona remained at the table. Gregory's documents spread before her. The evidence of his desperate attempt to protect them complicated her anger, adding layers of understanding that she hadn't expected to feel. His choice to leave had been wrong. There had been other options, better ways to handle the crisis. But it hadn't been the simple abandonment she had believed for so long. As she gathered the papers and prepared to lock up the restaurant, Fiona realized she was facing 3 paths forward, each with its own consequences. She could forgive Gregory, moving to Miami to rebuild their family. She could accept Nathan's business proposal, likely closing the door on reconciliation with Gregory while securing the lighthouse's future. Or she could find a different path altogether, one that prioritized what she and Talia needed above the expectations of either man. By the time she climbed the stairs to their empty apartment, Fiona had made her decision. It wasn't the choice that would please everyone, or even the one that would be easiest for her heart. But for the first time in 20 years, she was choosing based on what she wanted for her future, not what Gregory needed, what Newport expected, or what tradition demanded. Tomorrow, she would explain her decision to the 3 people it would affect most: Talia, Gregory, and Nathan. Tonight, she would sleep more peacefully than she had since finding Gregory's note 5 months ago, secure in the knowledge that whatever happened next would be on her terms. The following morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight sparkling on the harbor waters visible from Fiona's bedroom window. She had overslept for the first time in months, exhaustion finally claiming its due after the emotional roller coaster of the previous day. A text from Talia let her know that her daughter would be spending the morning with Gregory at Vivian's, returning to the restaurant for the afternoon shift. The message ended with, "We need to talk later," words that would have filled Fiona with dread in the past but now seemed like a natural part of navigating their new reality. After showering and dressing, Fiona called Nathan, inviting him to meet at the lighthouse before it opened for lunch. His immediate agreement suggested he had been waiting for her call, perhaps expecting it to contain news of her reconciliation with Gregory. When he arrived an hour later, Fiona was sitting at a table by the window, 2 cups of coffee already poured. The morning light illuminated her face, highlighting a serenity that hadn't been present during their dinner on the boat or amidst last night's chaos. "You've made a decision," Nathan observed as he took the seat across from her. Fiona smiled, appreciating his directness. "About several things, yes." "Gregory told you about the gambling debts," Nathan guessed, sipping his coffee. At Fiona's surprised look, he added, "Small-town gossip. The fisherman who delivers to Vivian's cook mentioned Gregory's return and overheard enough to piece it together." "Newport," Fiona sighed, unsurprised that their private business was already circulating through town. "Yes, Gregory explained why he left. He was trying to protect us in his own misguided way." Nathan's expression remained carefully neutral. "And now he wants to reconcile? He's offered to take us to Miami, where he has a job waiting." Fiona watched Nathan's face as she delivered this news, seeing the quick flash of disappointment before his features settled into acceptance. "I see," Nathan said quietly. "A fresh start might be good for all of you." "It might," Fiona agreed. "But it's not what I want." Hope flickered in Nathan's eyes, quickly tamped down. "What do you want, Fiona?" It was the same question he had asked on his boat weeks earlier, but this time Fiona had an answer. "I want the lighthouse, not as Gregory's wife or your business partner, but as its owner. My own business built with my own hands." Nathan leaned back, surprise evident in his expression. "That's not what I expected." "I know," Fiona acknowledged, "but these past 5 months have shown me that I'm capable of far more than I ever gave myself credit for. The lighthouse is starting to succeed because of choices I made, risks I took. I don't want to abandon that journey now, either by following Gregory to Miami or by letting someone else take control of the restaurant's future, even if that means turning down my investment offer," Nathan asked carefully. Fiona met his gaze directly. "Your offer would save the lighthouse financially, but it would also make it partly yours. I need it to be mine, Nathan, at least for now while I figure out who I am beyond being Gregory's wife or Talia's mother." Instead of disappointment, respect dawned in Nathan's eyes. "I understand," he said simply, "but the bank deadline still stands. How will you manage that without investment?" "Last night's receipts were just the beginning," Fiona explained, confidence growing as she outlined her plan. "With the blog review bringing in tourists, we can generate enough revenue to negotiate better terms with the bank. Gregory has offered..." His car sale proceeds to help clear some of the debt. "Between those funds and our improving business, I believe we can secure refinancing." "It's risky," Nathan pointed out, though his tone held admiration rather than doubt. "Life is risky," Fiona countered with a small smile. 5 months ago that thought would have terrified me. Now I'm ready to embrace it." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the harbor visible beyond the window. Boats beginning their day's journeys against the backdrop of blue water and bluer sky. "And what about us?" Nathan finally asked, the question gentle but direct. Fiona reached across the table to take his hand. "I care about you, Nathan. More than I expected to, more than I was prepared for after 20 years with one man. But I need time to stand on my own, to finish this journey of self-discovery before I can consider beginning another journey with someone new." Nathan turned his hand to hold hers, his grasp warm and reassuring. "I respect that," he said, his voice gentle. "And I'm not going anywhere, Fiona. If you're ready to explore what might be between us, I'll be here." The honesty between them felt like a gift, one Fiona hadn't expected to find amid the wreckage of her marriage. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not just for understanding, but for everything these past months. Your friendship has meant more than you know." Nathan squeezed her hand once before releasing it. "So what happens with Gregory? Will he accept your decision to stay?" The question brought Fiona back to the harder conversation that still lay ahead. "I don't know," she admitted, "but this isn't just my decision. Talia has a stake in this too." As if summoned by her mother's words, the restaurant door opened and Talia appeared, Gregory a few steps behind her. They stopped short at the sight of Nathan and Fiona sitting together by the window, an intimacy to their posture that couldn't be disguised. I thought you'd be alone, Talia said, her voice carefully neutral as she assessed the situation. Fiona rose from her seat, meeting her daughter's gaze directly. Nathan and I were discussing the future of the lighthouse, but I'm glad you're both here. We all need to talk. Gregory remained near the door, his stance wary. Should I come back later? He asked, glancing at Nathan with barely concealed hostility. No, Fiona said firmly. What I have to say concerns all of us. She gestured to the table. Please sit down. An uncomfortable silence fell as they arranged themselves around the table, Talia between her parents, Nathan slightly apart, all four connected by circumstances none of them could have predicted 6 months ago. Fiona took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Gregory, I appreciate your explanation about why you left. I believe you were trying to protect us in your own way, but I can't go to Miami with you. Pain flashed across Gregory's face, quickly masked. I understand, he said stiffly. After what I did, I have no right to expect forgiveness. This isn't about forgiveness, Fiona corrected gently. It's about what I need now, what Talia needs. And what we need is stability, not another upheaval. Talia looked between her parents, her expression troubled. Does that mean you're getting divorced? The directness of the question startled Fiona. I don't know yet, she answered honestly. What I do know is that I've discovered strengths these past months that I never knew I had. I've built something here, not just keeping the lighthouse afloat, but transforming it into something that's truly mine. I'm not ready to walk away from that. So you're choosing the restaurant over our family, Gregory said, a hint of bitterness creeping into his tone. Nathan shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent, recognizing that this was not his conversation to join. No, Fiona replied firmly. I'm choosing what's best for Talia and me, which includes financial stability and emotional well-being. The lighthouse provides both. And what about me? Where do I fit in this new life you've built without... Me? Gregory asked, the question directed at both Fiona and Talia. It was Talia who answered, her voice steadier than Fiona had heard in months. I want you in my life, Dad. I've missed you so much. But Mom's right. I need stability right now. I'm applying to colleges next year. I can't just leave Newport and start over somewhere else. The realization that Talia supported her decision sent a wave of relief through Fiona. She hadn't been sure how her daughter would respond, whether the pull of having her father back would outweigh other considerations. Gregory absorbed his daughter's words, conflict visible on his face. I don't want to lose either of you, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. But my job is in Miami. I need that income to pay off the rest of the debt. I have a solution, Fiona said carefully. Nathan's original business offer included expanding the Lighthouse brand to Boston, where he has connections. We could open a second location there, with you as manager. All three of her companions stared at her in surprise. You'd trust me? To run a second restaurant after everything? Gregory asked, disbelief evident in his voice. You're an excellent restaurant manager, Gregory. That was never the issue between us. Fiona turned to Nathan. Would you consider modifying your investment proposal? Instead of becoming a partner in this location, you would invest in expansion, with Gregory managing the Boston restaurant. Nathan's eyes widened as he considered the suggestion. It's unconventional, he said slowly, but it could work. The Davies family has prime restaurant real estate in Boston that's been sitting empty. Your seafood concept would do well there. This way, Gregory could earn the income he needs to clear his debt while remaining close enough to be part of Talia's life, Fiona explained. And the Lighthouse brand would grow without me having to give up control of this location. The solution wasn't perfect. Nothing could be, given the complicated circumstances, but it offered a path forward that addressed everyone's needs. Gregory would have meaningful work and proximity to his daughter. Talia would have both parents in her life without further disruption. The Lighthouse would have the financial backing it needed to survive and grow. What about us? Gregory asked Fiona quietly. Is there any chance for our marriage? It was the question Fiona had been dreading, yet she found herself answering with unexpected clarity. I don't know, she said honestly. Too much has happened, Gregory. I've changed too much. We would need to get to know each other again, slowly. As the people we are now. Gregory nodded, accepting this truth with surprising grace. I'd like that chance, he said simply, to know the woman you've become. Nathan cleared his throat, drawing their attention. For what it's worth, I think Fiona's idea has merit from a business perspective. The Boston market is underserved for authentic coastal cuisine. With the right management, a second lighthouse could be very successful. The conversation shifted to practical matters: financing details, location possibilities, timeline for expansion. As they talked, the tension gradually eased, replaced by a tentative sense of collaboration. They were four adults working toward a solution, not rivals vying for Fiona's loyalty. When the lunch prep staff began arriving, signaling the end of their private discussion, Fiona felt lighter than she had in months. No final decisions had been made about her marriage or her relationship with Nathan. Those would require time and careful consideration. But the immediate crisis had been resolved with a solution that put her and Talia's needs at the center. As Gregory and Nathan shook hands, stiffly but without overt hostility, Talia approached her mother, slipping an arm around her waist. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "Giving Dad another chance after everything?" Fiona hugged her daughter close. "I'm giving us all another chance," she corrected gently. "Not to go back to how things were, but to build something new that works better for everyone, especially you." "What about Mr. Davies?" Talia asked, her perception uncomfortably accurate. "I've seen how he looks at you, how you look at him." A flush crept up Fiona's cheeks. "That's complicated, and not something that needs to be decided right now." Talia considered this, then nodded with a wisdom beyond her years. "You deserve to be happy, Mom. After everything you've done for us, you deserve to choose what makes you happy." The simple statement brought tears to Fiona's eyes. Through all the hardship of the past months, this might be the greatest gift, that her teenage daughter could see her not just as a mother or wife, but as a woman with her own needs and desires. "So do you," Fiona whispered, pressing a kiss to Talia's forehead. "And whatever happens next, your happiness will always be my priority." As their customers began arriving for lunch, drawn by the glowing online review and Newport's ever-efficient gossip network, Fiona took her place at the host stand. The lighthouse's future wasn't guaranteed. There would still be challenging days ahead, difficult conversations and hard choices to make. But for the first time, those choices would be hers to make for herself, not reactions to decisions others had made for her. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between your own needs and others' expectations? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. The summer passed in a blur of activity, as the lighthouse continued its transformation from struggling family business to thriving destination restaurant. The positive review brought tourists in droves, and Fiona's innovative approach to traditional New England seafood kept them coming back. By August, they were turning away customers without reservations and considering extending their hours to accommodate demand. With the immediate financial crisis averted, Fiona was able to refinance their loans on more favorable terms. Gregory's car sale proceeds, combined with his ongoing payments from his Miami job, had reduced their debt to manageable levels. The threat of foreclosure, which had hung over them like a storm cloud for months, finally dissipated. Nathan's investment in the Boston expansion moved forward. With Gregory making weekly trips to oversee the renovation of the space Nathan had secured in the city's trendy Seaport district. Working together on this project had forced the two men to set aside their family's historical animosity, finding common ground in their shared business interests and, though neither would admit it aloud, their concern for Fiona and Talia's well-being. For Fiona, the summer became a time of rediscovery, not just of the lighthouse's potential, but of herself. Each successful service, each positive review, each business decision made confidently on her own terms reinforced the strength she had found in crisis. The woman who had once defined herself primarily as Gregory's wife and Talia's mother was emerging as a respected business owner and community leader in her own right. Her relationship with Gregory evolved slowly, cautiously. He had taken an apartment in Newport, close enough to be present in Talia's life, but maintaining the separation Fiona needed. Twice-weekly family dinners became their new normal, occasionally awkward but increasingly comfortable as they established new boundaries and expectations. On a warm September evening, with the summer season winding down and Talia back in school, Fiona sat on the restaurant's deck after closing, watching the sunset paint the harbor in shades of gold and pink. The peaceful moment was interrupted by Nathan's arrival, a bottle of champagne in hand. "I thought we should celebrate," he said, holding up the bottle. "The Boston location lease was finalized today. The second lighthouse will open in spring." Fiona smiled, gesturing for him to join her. "That is worth celebrating. I'm not sure I ever properly thanked you for taking a chance on this crazy expansion idea." Nathan poured 2 glasses, handing one to her. "No thanks needed. It's good business, but more importantly, it was the right solution for you and Talia." They clinked glasses, sipping the champagne as the last rays of sun disappeared beyond the horizon. In the month since Gregory's return, Nathan had been a constant presence in Fiona's life, supportive but never pushing, available but respectful of her need to resolve her family situation at her own pace. "Gregory asked me yesterday if I've made a decision about our marriage," Fiona said after a comfortable silence. "He's been patient, but I think he needs an answer." Nathan's expression remained carefully neutral. "And have you made a decision?" Fiona turned her glass in her hands, watching the bubbles rise and disperse. "Yes," she said softly. "I have." The weeks of working together on the Boston project had given her a new perspective on Gregory, not as the husband who had abandoned her, but as a flawed man who had made a terrible choice out of misguided protectiveness and was now genuinely trying to make amends. She had seen his dedication to rebuilding their family's security, his willingness to accept a subordinate role in the business she now controlled, his efforts to rebuild trust with Talia. "I've decided to file for divorce," Fiona said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the decision. "Gregory and I will always be connected through Talia and the lighthouse, but our marriage ended the day he left. What we are building now is a different kind of relationship, a partnership of sorts, but not a marriage." Nathan absorbed this information, his expression revealing nothing of his own feelings on the matter. "Are you at peace with that decision?" "I am," Fiona nodded. "For the first time in my adult life, I'm making choices based on what I truly want, not what's expected of me or what would please others. It's terrifying and exhilarating all at once." "And what is it that you want, Fiona?" Nathan asked, echoing the question he had first posed to her months ago on his boat. Fiona turned to face him fully, her decision made not in the heat of crisis, but in the quiet certainty of knowing her own mind. "I want to continue building the lighthouse into something that's truly mine. I want to see Talia off to college next year, confident that she's learned from both her parents' mistakes and triumphs. And—" she hesitated, then continued with newfound boldness, "I want to explore what might exist between us, when the timing is right." Nathan's smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in the way that had first drawn her to him. "I can be patient," he said simply. "Some journeys are worth waiting for." As they sat together, watching the harbor lights reflect on the dark water, Fiona realized how far she had come from that desperate night when she'd stood alone in the lighthouse's kitchen, vowing to save a business she barely understood. In fighting for her family's financial survival, she had discovered something far more valuable: her own capacity for resilience, innovation, and independent decision-making. The future remained uncertain in many ways. The Boston expansion might succeed brilliantly or struggle to find its footing. Her co-parenting relationship with Gregory would undoubtedly face challenges as they navigated their new roles. Whatever developed between her and Nathan would need time and space to grow organically, without the pressure of crisis or financial necessity. But for perhaps the first time in her adult life, Fiona welcomed that uncertainty. The woman who had once craved security and predictability above all else now understood that true strength came not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them on her own terms. As Nathan refilled their champagne glasses, proposing a toast to the lighthouse's future, Fiona added her own silent acknowledgement to the storm that had nearly destroyed her family, but had ultimately revealed the unshakable foundation she could build upon. In losing what she thought she needed, she had discovered what she truly wanted, and in that discovery, she had found freedom. On the morning of the Boston restaurant's grand opening, Fiona stood in her closet, deliberating over her outfit, with an attention to detail that would have seemed frivolous during the height of their financial crisis. Now 8 months after Gregory's return, and almost a year since his departure, such normal concerns felt like luxury. The second lighthouse had come together beautifully, blending the original restaurant's coastal charm with a more sophisticated, urban aesthetic. Gregory had proven himself an capable manager, channeling his considerable talents into creating an experience that honored Newport traditions while appealing to Boston's cosmopolitan clientele. Food critics had been invited to a soft opening the previous week, and early reviews were promising. Fiona finally settled on a seafoam green dress that complemented her eyes, a far cry from the practical work clothes that had become her uniform during the darkest days. As she fastened a simple silver necklace, a gift from Talia for her recent birthday, she caught sight of her reflection. The woman looking back at her had changed in subtle but significant ways. Confidence had replaced anxiety in her posture. Self-assurance had smoothed the worry lines from her forehead. She looked, Fiona realized with some surprise, happy. The drive to Boston with Talia gave mother and daughter rare, uninterrupted time together. With college applications submitted and her academic future taking shape, Talia had blossomed back into the engaged, thoughtful young woman she had been before Gregory's disappearance. Her acceptance to Brown University, her top choice just 40 minutes from Newport, had come with a substantial scholarship, a testament to her resilience in maintaining her studies despite family turmoil. Nervous about seeing Dad and Mr. Davies together, Talia asked as they crossed the Massachusetts border. Fiona smiled at her daughter's perceptiveness. "A little," she admitted. "Though they've been remarkably civil while working on this project." "Civil isn't the same as comfortable," Talia pointed out. "Everyone will be watching how you interact with both of them." The observation was accurate. Though Fiona's divorce from Gregory had been finalized months ago, Newport society still buzzed with speculation about the unusual arrangement the former couple had created. Business partners, but no longer spouses. Co-parents who maintained separate lives while working toward common goals. Add to that her evolving relationship with Nathan, which had progressed slowly but steadily in recent months, and tonight's event was certain to fuel gossip for weeks to come. "Let them watch," Fiona said with newfound indifference to public opinion. "What matters is that this arrangement works for us." Talia reached across the console to squeeze her mother's hand. "I'm proud of you, Mum, for everything you've built this year, not just the restaurants, but the life you've created. For us." The simple statement brought tears to Fiona's eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know." The Boston location of the lighthouse occupied a renovated warehouse with spectacular views of the harbor. As Fiona and Talia approached, the illuminated sign, a perfect replica of the original Newport Lighthouse logo Gregory had designed decades ago, cast a warm glow over the entrance. Staff hurried about with last-minute preparations, the nervous energy of opening night palpable in the air. Gregory met them at the door, his face lighting up at the sight of his daughter. The months of purposeful work had been good for him, restoring some of the confidence that had been missing upon his return. The gambling addiction that had nearly destroyed their family was being addressed through therapy and support groups, a condition of their business partnership that Fiona had insisted upon. "You both look beautiful," he said, embracing Talia before turning to Fiona with a more reserved greeting. "Everything's ready. The staff is prepared, the kitchen is running smoothly, and the reservation list is completely booked for the next 3 weeks. "Congratulations, Gregory," Fiona said sincerely. "You've done an amazing job here." A shadow of regret crossed his face before being replaced by genuine gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without your trust, Fiona. After everything, well, it means more than I can say that you gave me this chance." Before the conversation could turn more personal, Nathan appeared, handsome in a tailored suit that emphasized his athletic build. The months of working alongside Gregory had established a professional respect between the men, if not friendship. Tonight, That respect would be tested as they navigated the social complexities of the grand opening together. "Fiona, Talia," Nathan greeted them warmly. "The place looks spectacular, doesn't it? Gregory's attention to detail rivals even yours, Fiona." The generous compliment seemed to surprise Gregory, who nodded his thanks before excusing himself to check on the kitchen. As he walked away, Nathan offered Fiona his arm. "Shall we make the rounds? Several investors are eager to meet the visionary behind the lighthouse's expansion." The evening unfolded like a dream, with Boston's culinary elite and social tastemakers mingling throughout the beautifully appointed space. Gregory's menu, faithful to Newport's classics but enhanced with innovative touches, received enthusiastic praise. Fiona found herself at ease in this new role, confidently discussing business plans and culinary philosophy with people who now saw her as an entrepreneur rather than simply a restaurant owner's wife. During a quiet moment, she stepped out onto the restaurant's deck, seeking a brief respite from the constant socializing. The Boston skyline glittered against the night sky, so different from Newport's more subdued beauty, yet compelling in its own way. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Nathan's voice came from behind her as he joined her at the railing. Fiona smiled, turning to face him. "I was just thinking about how differently this night might have gone if you hadn't walked into the lighthouse with that crate of seafood last year." Nathan chuckled at the memory. "One of my better business decisions, as it turned out." "Was it really just business that motivated you?" Fiona asked, her tone teasing yet genuine. Nathan's expression softened as he reached for her hand. "No, it wasn't," he admitted, "though I couldn't have predicted where that delivery would lead us, sir." The warmth of his touch sent a familiar flutter through Fiona's chest. Their relationship had developed with careful deliberation over the past months. Dinner dates, long walks along Newport's cliff walk, quiet evenings aboard his boat. Nathan had respected her need to finalize her divorce and establish her independence before pursuing anything serious, a patience that had only deepened her feelings for him. "I've been thinking," Fiona said, turning to face the harbor again, Nathan's hand still clasped in hers. "With Talia leaving for college in the fall, that apartment above the restaurant will feel very empty." Nathan stepped closer, his presence solid and reassuring beside her. "Are you thinking of moving?" "Maybe," Fiona replied, her heartbeat quickening at what she was about to suggest. "Or maybe I'm thinking it's time to consider sharing my space with someone who makes me happy." The implication hung between them, fragile and full of possibility. 8 months ago, the idea of inviting another man into her life would have seemed impossible. Now it felt like the natural next step in the journey she had begun when Gregory left, a journey not of replacement, but of growth and rediscovery. "Fiona Cartwright," Nathan said, his voice gentle as he turned her to face him. "Are you asking me to move in with you?" The directness that had first drawn her to him still had the power to take her breath away. "I believe I am," she confirmed, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Not immediately, but soon, when it feels right for both of us." Instead of answering with words, Nathan leaned down to kiss her, a tender, unhurried kiss that spoke of patience rewarded and promises kept. When they parted, his eyes held a depth of emotion that made Fiona's heart swell. "I've learned something important this past year," she said softly. "Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful destinations." As they stood together overlooking Boston Harbor, Fiona felt the final pieces of her new life clicking into place. The journey had been painful, filled with tears and doubt and moments of despair, but standing here now, successful business owner, respected community leader, devoted mother and woman in love on her own terms, she wouldn't change a single step of the path that had brought her to this moment. The door behind them opened, and Talia appeared. "Mom, they're asking for a speech from both owners," she said, smiling at the sight of her mother's hand entwined with Nathan's. "Coming," Fiona replied, giving Nathan's hand a final squeeze before releasing it. As she followed her daughter inside, she caught Gregory's eye across the crowded room. He nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement and perhaps even blessing. They had found their way to a new kind of family, not the one either of them had envisioned, but one built on honesty, respect, and the courage to choose happiness over convention. Later that night, as champagne flowed and the Boston elite celebrated the newest culinary gem in their city, Fiona stood between Gregory and Nathan to toast the lighthouse's expansion. To the gathered crowd, they were simply successful business partners celebrating an achievement. But Fiona knew the fuller truth, that this moment represented not just professional triumph, but personal redemption, not just a business expansion, but the expansion of her own heart to encompass new possibilities. "To the lighthouse," she said, raising her glass. "May it continue to guide us all safely home, wherever home may be." As glasses clinked and applause filled the room, Fiona met Talia's gaze across the crowd. Her daughter smiled knowingly, pride shining in her eyes. In that moment, Fiona knew with absolute certainty that the choice she had made, to build a new life rather than cling to the remnants of the old, had been the right one, not just for herself, but for everyone she loved. The woman who had once feared standing alone now stood firmly on her own 2 feet, surrounded by people who valued her strength rather than her compliance, her vision rather than her support of others' dreams. In giving up the love she thought she needed to protect her daughter, Fiona had discovered a greater love, for herself, for her family in all its new complexity, and for a future she was now brave enough to shape according to her own desires. It was, she reflected, as she accepted congratulations from Boston's elite, the most unexpected gift Gregory's departure could have given her, the freedom to become the woman she was always meant to be. Congratulations, type 9 in the comments, so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.